The morning sun dawned over the Palestinian hills, casting a deceptively peaceful light. Dew sparkled on the grass, and the gentle sounds of nature filled the air, a stark contrast to the impending storm. Mamluk Sultanate soldiers, summoned from Cairo and Damascus, adjusted their armor and honed their blades, bracing themselves. For months, they had been preparing for a battle many believed would determine the fate of the Islamic world. The Mongols, undefeated conquerors of Asia, had instilled terror in every kingdom, obliterating cities and armies with astonishing speed. Now, the Mamluks, under Sultan Qutuz and his brilliant general, Baibars, stood ready to confront them at a place called Ain Jalut. The Mamluk army, smaller in number, was characterized by its discipline and strategic acumen. Every movement was deliberate, each soldier acutely aware of the enormous responsibility they bore. Qutuz, a tall and commanding figure, surveyed his troops, his eyes sweeping across the horizon. He knew that their adversaries, led by Kitbuka, a Mongol general infamous for his cruelty and cunning, would exploit any weakness without hesitation. Yet, Qutuz's confidence was not born of arrogance, but rather from meticulous preparation, the unity of his forces, and a firm belief that the Mongols, despite their fearsome reputation, could be defeated. As the sun ascended, a cloud of dust appeared on the distant plains, signaling the Mongols' approach. Their army seemed endless, banners fluttering and horses thundering across the land. The sheer size of their force might have unnerved lesser commanders, but the Mamluks remained composed. Baibars, riding along the lines, shouted words of encouragement, adjusting positions and ensuring every cavalryman knew his role. They had devised a plan, a strategic combination of feigned retreats, ambushes, and calculated charges designed to turn the Mongols' aggressive tactics against them. The Mongols arrived at the valley near Ain Jalut, their armor gleaming under the intense sunlight. Kitbuka surveyed the Mamluk lines and smirked. He had conquered vast territories, toppling cities and armies with terrifying efficiency. Yet, he noted something different about these Mamluks. Their eyes burned with determination, and their formations were tight, disciplined, and battle-ready. Initially, he dismissed it, assuming that fear would soon shatter their ranks. The battle commenced with a ferocity typical of Mongol campaigns. Arrows rained down like a deadly storm, and the clash of steel echoed across the plains. However, the Mamluks held their ground, utilizing the terrain to their advantage. Narrow valleys and hidden gullies allowed them to channel the Mongols, mitigating the effectiveness of their numerical superiority. Qutuz and Baibars watched intently, waiting for a precise moment to unleash their hidden forces. Hours passed under the relentless sun, sweat drenching the soldiers' garments and dust caking their faces. Each side probed for weaknesses, testing the other's endurance. The Mongols, accustomed to swift victories, grew frustrated by the Mamluks' unwavering discipline. The feigned retreats, a tactic the Mamluks had perfected, lured Mongol units into carefully laid traps, where concealed cavalry would suddenly appear, disrupting their advance and throwing them into disarray. At the heart of the battlefield, a particularly critical moment unfolded. A detachment of Mongol horsemen charged at the Mamluk center, attempting to break the line. Baibars, recognizing the maneuver, led a countercharge with his elite cavalry. The clash was deafening. Horses screamed, lances shattered, and men engaged in fierce hand-to-hand combat. The Mamluks' superior knowledge of the terrain, combined with their precisely timed reinforcements, began to shift the balance. Slowly, the Mongols were being drawn into a web of traps and ambushes, each step bringing them closer to disorganization and eventual defeat. By late afternoon, the Mongols, who had seemed invincible just hours before, began to falter. Kitbuka's characteristic calm confidence cracked as reports reached him of his units being surrounded and annihilated. Qutuz, riding along the front lines, urged his men to press the advantage, sensing the moment of victory was near. He understood the cost. This would be a battle where courage, discipline, and leadership were tested to their utmost limits. Finally, after relentless fighting, the Mamluks launched a decisive assault. Hidden forces struck the flanks. Cavalry charges shattered formations, and the Mongol army, stretched thin and overconfident, began to collapse. Kitbuka was captured, and the remnants of the Mongol army scattered across the plains. The battle that had begun with uncertainty ended in a resounding victory for the Mamluks. Ain Jalut had proven that the Mongol advance could be stopped, a revelation that resonated throughout the Islamic world and beyond. In the aftermath, silence descended upon the battlefield. The air was heavy with dust, the ground littered with the debris of conflict. Survivors from both armies tended to the wounded, mourned their dead, and began the slow process of coming to terms with the events that had transpired. For the Mamluks, the victory was more than a mere military triumph. It was a declaration that courage, strategy, and unity could triumph over even the most feared conquerors in the world. The significance of Ain Jalut would not be lost on history. It marked the first major defeat of the Mongol army, halting their seemingly unstoppable expansion. For Qutuz and Baibars, it solidified their reputations as brilliant leaders and strategists. And for the soldiers who had fought that day, the memory of the battle will remain etched in their hearts, a testament to the human spirit's resilience against overwhelming odds. As night fell, the survivors looked out over the plains, aware that this victory was only the beginning of a new chapter in the struggle for control and survival. The dust would settle, the cries would fade, but the courage displayed at Ain Jalut would resonate for generations, inspiring tales of valor, strategy, and the enduring fight for freedom. The aftermath of the first clash had barely settled when the Mamluk forces regrouped, taking stock of their positions and the battered landscape. The valley of Ain Jalut, scarred by hoofprints and churned earth, bore witness to the intensity of the opening engagements. Sultan Qutuz, mounted on his horse, rode through the ranks, nodding and speaking softly to his lieutenants. He understood that this battle, like all decisive confrontations, required constant vigilance, adaptation, and the ability to anticipate the enemy's moves. The Mongols, though shaken by the initial setbacks, were far from defeated. Kitbuka, whose reputation as a relentless strategist preceded him, was already reassembling his units. He moved along the lines, his presence a dark shadow over his men, instilling both discipline and fear. His army, though disrupted, retained its core strength. Skilled archers readied their bows, cavalrymen adjusted their formations, and the thunder of hooves signaled that the Mongols intended to regain momentum. For them, retreat was not an option. They had never known defeat, and surrender was inconceivable. As the sun climbed higher, heat radiated off the dry earth, adding a physical strain to the already taxing battle. Soldiers on both sides felt the weariness settling into their limbs, but there was no time for hesitation. The Mamluks, aware of the Mongols' relentless aggression, relied on precise timing, using the terrain to maximize their advantages. Narrow gullies, hidden ridges, and patches of uneven ground became traps, cleverly employed to channel the Mongol cavalry into zones where ambushes were waiting. The subtlety of these maneuvers required absolute coordination and trust in the command structure. The battle's rhythm changed with sudden bursts of violence. Small Mongol units, moving with astonishing speed, would strike, testing Mamluk flanks before vanishing, luring their opponents into traps. At these moments, Baibars, known for his quick thinking and fearless leadership, would direct counterattacks, sending cavalry through concealed paths to encircle and overwhelm the attackers. These interactions resembled a deadly chess game, each side attempting to outmaneuver the other, every misstep potentially fatal. In the center of the battlefield, the tension was almost palpable. Mongol horsemen, emboldened by desperation, charged in waves against the Mamluk line, their lances aimed to break the formation. The Mamluks held firm, bracing against the onslaught. Archers rained volleys of arrows, and men-at-arms met the charges with disciplined shields and precise strikes. The Mamluk cavalry, waiting for the perfect moment, erupted from hiding, striking at the Mongol flanks. The impact was devastating, sending shockwaves to the Mongol units and disrupting their rhythm. Amid the chaos, Qutuz maintained a calm but commanding presence. He was everywhere at once, observing, directing, and encouraging. His voice rose above the din, carrying commands that cut through confusion. He knew that the Mongols' strength lay in their cohesion and speed. To shatter them, he needed to exploit even the smallest crack. And so, the Mamluk army pressed forward, with patience and precision, turning the Mongols' own tactics against them. Hours passed under the relentless sun. The sounds of battle, the clash of steel, The screams of men and horses, the thundering of hooves, created a symphony of war that seemed endless. Yet, the Mamluks' discipline began to show results. Mongol units, once feared for their unyielding advance, found themselves isolated, encircled, and cut off from support. Kitbuka's frustration grew, and the Mongol psychological advantage, which had so often been decisive, began to erode. The Mamluks were not just fighting with weapons. They were waging a battle of wits and endurance. In one crucial moment, a large contingent of Mongol cavalry attempted a sweeping maneuver intended to envelop the Mamluk forces. Anticipating this, Baibars had positioned his elite troops to counter precisely this threat. The hidden Mamluk units struck from the flanks and rear, creating chaos within the Mongol formation. Horses reared, riders fell, and arrows flew in every direction. The Mongols' coordination faltered, and the tide of battle began to turn decisively in favor of the defenders. As dusk approached, the sun casting long shadows across the valley, the Mamluks launched a coordinated final assault. Every unit moved with purpose, converging on the disoriented Mongol forces. Cavalry charged, infantry advanced, and archers maintained a relentless barrage. Kitbuka, realizing the precariousness of his situation, attempted to rally his men, but the cohesion of his army was shattered. The Mongol dream of swift conquest had been challenged in a way they had never experienced before. By nightfall, the battle was effectively decided. The Mongol army, previously seen as invincible, was broken, its remnants fleeing across the plains. Kitbuka was captured, his reputation as a conqueror halted abruptly. The Mamluks, exhausted but triumphant, gathered to tend the wounded, secure the battlefield, and honor the fallen. The victory at Ain Jalut was more than a tactical success. It was a profound psychological triumph, proving that even the most formidable force could be resisted with intelligence, courage, and unity. For Kutuz and Baibars, the outcome confirmed their status as exceptional leaders. For their soldiers, it was a moment of pride and resilience, a testament to the power of discipline and strategy. The battle's lessons would echo through time, shaping military thought and inspiring generations. Ain Jalut was not just a battlefield. It was a stage upon which human courage and tactical brilliance overcame the shadow of an empire thought unstoppable. As the stars emerged over the quieting valley, the Mamluk forces reflected on their victory and the hardships endured. They had faced an enemy that had swept through nations with unparalleled speed and brutality, yet they had stood their ground, adapted, and struck decisively. The memory of that day, the dust, the noise, the fear, and the valor, would remain forever, a symbol of what could be achieved when determination, preparation, and unity converge in the crucible of battle. As the aftermath of the initial engagements settled into a tense calm, both armies reassessed their strategies. The valley of Ain Jalut had become a living map of destruction and determination. Smoke drifted lazily from small fires where the fallen horses and carts had burned, while the wounded clutched the edges of the battlefield, praying for the next moment of respite. Sultan Kutuz, ever vigilant, moved among his commanders, ensuring that the Mamluk forces remained organized and poised. The men understood that the battle was far from over. The Mongol threat still loomed, unyielding and formidable. Kitbuka, the Mongol general, showed no signs of surrender either. He was a man whose resolve had carried armies across continents, and even in this precarious moment, his mind raced with tactical calculations. He repositioned his cavalry, employing the classic Mongol tactic of feigned retreats and rapid strikes. The Mongols were masters of mobility, and Kitbuka knew that regaining the momentum would require precise timing, discipline, and the ability to exploit any gap in the Mamluk lines. His eyes scanned the battlefield like a hawk, seeking any advantage, however fleeting. The Mamluk forces, anticipating such maneuvers, employed a layered defense strategy. Baibars, the shrewd and daring commander, oversaw small squads hidden behind ridges and within narrow ravines, ready to strike at the Mongols' flanks. Every hill, every dip in the terrain, became a potential trap. The Mamluks knew that they could not match the Mongols in raw speed, but they could exploit the environment, turning the land itself into a weapon. Their patience and discipline were as formidable as their swords and arrows. The next phase of the battle unfolded, like a tense game of strategy. Small groups of Mongol cavalry dashed forward, striking swiftly and retreating before the Mamluks could fully respond. These attacks were designed to stretch the enemy thin and to create openings for larger maneuvers. Baibars countered with ingenuity, sending hidden units through unexpected paths to cut off these raiding parties. The valley echoed with the clash of steel, the neighing of panicked horses, and the cries of men, yet beneath the chaos lay an intricate orchestration of tactics. At the heart of the battlefield, the struggle was both brutal and calculated. The Mongol horsemen launched repeated charges, aiming to shatter the Mamluk infantry lines. Shields collided with spears, arrows flew in deadly arcs, and the ground seemed to shake under the weight of horses. Yet the Mamluk formations held firm. Archers provided continuous volleys, while infantry responded with disciplined strikes. And then, at the opportune moment, hidden cavalry erupted from the flanks, striking with precision. The impact disrupted the Mongol cohesion, sowing confusion among their ranks. Sultan Qutuz, a figure of calm authority amid the pandemonium, moved with purpose. His voice rose over the battlefield, issuing commands that cut through the tumult. Every order was deliberate, every movement calculated to exploit the Mongols' weaknesses. The Mongols relied heavily on their psychological edge, their reputation for invincibility. But here, in the narrow confines of Ain Jalut, that edge was diminished. The Mamluks used patience and timing as weapons, turning the battlefield into a canvas of tactical brilliance. The day wore on, and the relentless sun bore down upon the exhausted soldiers. Yet the Mamluk resolve remained unshaken. Kit Bukka attempted to rally his troops for one final coordinated assault, directing cavalry to sweep around the Mamluk lines. But Baibars had anticipated this maneuver. Hidden units struck the flanks and rear, creating pockets of chaos that the Mongols could not recover from. Horses stumbled, riders fell, and arrows pierced through the confusion. The Mongol formations, once seamless and terrifying, began to fragment. In this critical juncture, the Mamluks launched a concentrated offensive, converging from multiple directions. Infantry advanced with measured precision. Cavalry surged forward with thunderous momentum, and archers maintained a constant rain of arrows. The Mongol army, known for its rapid and devastating strikes, now struggled to maintain order. Kit Bukka's attempts to regroup were thwarted at every turn, and the Mongol dream of an unstoppable advance began to crumble. The turning point was undeniable. The Mamluks, having endured the ferocity of the Mongol onslaught, now held the initiative. The discipline, coordination, and strategic placement of troops had transformed the battlefield. Kit Bukka, realizing the untenable position, fought desperately to salvage his command, but the momentum had shifted irreversibly. The Mongols, who had once swept through nations with unmatched speed, were now retreating, their ranks broken and morale shaken. By the time night began to fall, Ain Jalut was firmly in Mamluk hands. The valley, once filled with the fury of battle, grew quiet, punctuated only by the groans of the wounded and the low murmur of survivors regrouping. Kit Bukka had been captured, and the remnants of the Mongol forces scattered across the plains. The victory was not merely a military triumph. It was a profound psychological and moral statement. The Mamluks had demonstrated that skill, courage, and strategic insight could overcome even the most feared army in the world. For Qutuz and Baibars, the outcome solidified their legacy as visionary leaders. For their soldiers, it was a moment of pride and resilience, a testament to the strength of disciplined planning and collective effort. The lessons of Ain Jalut would resonate through history, influencing military strategies for generations to come. The battle had shown that even the mightiest empire could be checked, that human ingenuity and courage could prevail over sheer force. As darkness enveloped the valley, the Mamluk forces reflected on the day's trials and triumphs. They had confronted an enemy that seemed invincible, yet through unity, intelligence, and resolve, they had turned the tide. The dust, the chaos, the fear, and the courage would be etched into memory, a lasting symbol of the enduring power of determination, strategy, and unwavering spirit in the crucible of war. As dawn broke over the valley once more, the Mamluk forces stirred with renewed determination. The previous day's victory had shifted momentum, but Sultan Qutuz knew that Ain Jalut was not yet fully decided. The Mongols, despite their setbacks, remained a formidable threat. Kit-Booka's reputation for ruthless strategy and rapid maneuvers still loomed large, and the memory of their devastating campaigns across the lands of the East haunted every commander. Every moment, every choice mattered, for even a single misstep could invite disaster. The battlefield was a mosaic of preparation and anticipation. Mamluk soldiers adjusted their armor, tested their weapons, and reviewed orders. The air was thick with sense of purpose. Each man understood the delicate balance between courage and caution. Baibars moved among the ranks with an intensity that inspired confidence. His mind raced with tactical calculations, considering terrain, enemy behavior, and the morale of his own men. The essence of war, he knew, was not merely brute force, but foresight and adaptability. Kit-Booka, undeterred, orchestrated his forces with the precision of a master strategist. The Mongol cavalry, famed for lightning speed, prepared flanking maneuvers aimed at the Mamluk center. Archers lined the hills, poised to rain arrows upon any exposed formation. Even in apparent disorder, the Mongols maintained cohesion, and their confidence, born from years of unstoppable conquest, lent them a formidable aura. Every glance and gesture from Kit-Booka seemed to communicate with the army, each movement part of a larger, unseen pattern. The clash began with a calculated probe by the Mongols, testing Mamluk reactions. A surge of cavalry swept toward the center, attempting to lure the defenders out of position. The Mamluks held firm, their lines disciplined, shields interlocked, and arrows raining steadily upon the advancing riders. Hidden units along the ridges readied themselves for the moment when the Mongols would overextend. It was a delicate dance, each side probing for weaknesses, each commander calculating odds in real time. A crescendo of violence erupted when the Mongols struck with full force. Horsemen thundered across open fields, encircling smaller detachments. Yet the Mamluks, anticipating these tactics, executed coordinated counterattacks. Baibars unleashed a flanking maneuver, catching a Mongol detachment in a deadly crossfire. The clash was thunderous. Steel rang against steel, arrows darkened the sky, and cries of exertion and pain filled the air. The precision and timing of Mamluk strategy began to unravel the Mongol momentum. Amid the chaos, Sultan Gatuz remained a figure of steady command. He directed reinforcements to threatened points, adjusted formations, and ensured communication lines remained intact. His presence was a calming force. His clarity of thought amidst the storm inspired soldiers to act with confidence. The battle was as much a test of leadership as it was of physical prowess. Every order, every movement, had the potential to tip the scales between triumph and catastrophe. The Mongols attempted a feigned retreat, a classic ploy to lure the Mamluks into a vulnerable position. Many soldiers, seasoned in combat, resisted the temptation to pursue recklessly. Baibars, ever observant, signaled hidden units to remain poised, ready to trap the overconfident enemy. The terrain itself became a weapon. Hills and narrow passes constrained the Mongols' mobility, negating some of their legendary speed. The battlefield, once a flat expanse, had transformed into a strategic labyrinth. As the hours dragged on, fatigue and heat weighed heavily on both armies. Yet the Mamluks, fortified by determination and careful planning, began to assert dominance. Mongol units found themselves caught in pincer movements, attacked from multiple directions, their formations breaking down under relentless pressure. Kit-Booka, observing the disarray, attempted to rally his troops, but the cohesion that had been their hallmark for decades now faltered. The tide of battle was unmistakably turning. A decisive moment arrived when Mamluk cavalry struck a critical flank. Horses thundered through gaps in the Mongol lines, infantry surged forward, and archers maintained a withering volley. Panic began to spread among Mongol ranks, turning confidence into chaos. Kit-Booka's strategies, brilliant in theory, could not withstand the relentless precision and discipline of the Mamluk forces. The battle's rhythm had shifted irreversibly, signaling the imminent collapse of Mongol ambitions at Ain Jalut. By late afternoon, the Mongols were in full retreat. Mamluk soldiers pressed their advantage, ensuring that no isolated units could regroup or escape easily. Kit-Booka himself was eventually captured, the symbol of Mongol invincibility finally subdued. The valley, once a theater of destruction and fear, now resonated with the quiet aftermath of a hard-fought victory. The Mamluks had proven that intelligence, adaptability, and unity could overcome even the most feared and experienced enemy. The impact of Ain Jalut extended beyond immediate military triumph. It marked a turning point, halting the Mongol advance into the Levant and demonstrating that strategic acumen could counter overwhelming power. For Sultan Qutuz and Baibars, it cemented their reputations as visionary leaders. For the Mamluk soldiers, it was a testament to discipline, courage, and resilience. The lessons of this day would echo through military history, shaping tactics and inspiring generations to come. As twilight descended upon Ain Jalut, the Mamluks surveyed the battlefield. The sun's fading light cast long shadows over the scarred earth. The silence that replaced the chaos was profound, broken only by the groans of the wounded and the rustling of supplies being gathered. Victory had been achieved not merely through strength, but through foresight, strategy, and unwavering resolve. The memory of the day, its perils and triumphs, would remain indelibly etched in the minds of all who fought there. The morning sun cast its first light over the valley of Ain Jalut, illuminating the scarred landscape of the previous battles. The Mamluk forces, though weary, were resolute. They had faced the Mongols' legendary might and endured, but the final chapter of this confrontation was yet to unfold. Sultan Qutuz moved among his soldiers, instilling courage and focus, understanding that even a single lapse could reverse the hard-won gains of the past days. Every man knew the weight of history rested on their shoulders. Kit Buka, aware that the Mongols' reputation depended on victory, prepared for one last attempt to regain dominance. Despite the setbacks and disarray, he was unyielding. His mind was a labyrinth of strategy, calculating every possible maneuver to exploit perceived weaknesses in the Mamluk lines. He rallied the remaining cavalry, signaling charges that sought to pierce the Mamluk center. The ground trembled as horses pounded across the earth. Archers loosed volleys with deadly precision, and swords flashed in a relentless rhythm. The Mamluks, however, Baibars had anticipated such desperation with uncanny accuracy. His unparalleled tactical acumen allowed him to strategically position concealed units along the high ridges and behind the natural defenses of the terrain, poised to unleash a devastating strike on the Mongol flanks. Every maneuver was meticulously planned, and each formation was painstakingly designed to withstand the Mongols' ferocious charges. Despite their exhaustion, the Mamluk soldiers moved with the precision and efficiency of a finely tuned machine. The valley, which had previously been a scene of utter chaos, was transformed into a theater of calculated precision, where strategy and timing were just as crucial to the outcome as sheer bravery. The intensity of the clash escalated as the Mongol horsemen launched another wave of relentless attacks. The Mamluk center trembled under the immense pressure, shields splintered, and the air reverberated with the deafening sounds of battle. Yet, the Mamluks stood their ground, resolute and unyielding. The infantry met the charging cavalry with a wall of spears and shields, while archers maintained a constant barrage of arrows. At critical moments, hidden cavalry units emerged from their concealed positions to strike the exposed Mongol flanks, further disrupting their advance. The Mongols' signature mobility, typically their greatest advantage, was significantly hampered by the challenging terrain and the meticulous positioning of Mamluk forces, proving that strategic intellect and careful planning could effectively counter raw speed and brute power. Kit Buka, witnessing the effectiveness of the Mamluk defenses firsthand, recognized the need to adapt his tactics. He initiated a series of feigned retreats and deceptive maneuvers in rapid succession, hoping to lure the Mamluks into a vulnerable overextension. However, the Mamluk commanders, seasoned by the preceding days of intense fighting, were not deceived by these ruses. Each unit maintained its discipline, patience, and coordinated movements. Slowly but surely, the Mongols' cohesion began to crumble, with cracks appearing in their once impenetrable formations. As the battle raged into the midday hours, the Mamluks seized the initiative, turning the tide in their favor. Coordinated cavalry and infantry attacks converged on weakened Mongol units, further exploiting their vulnerabilities. Archers, positioned on elevated ground, rained down arrows on the charging horsemen, while foot soldiers engaged in fierce close combat, pushing back the Mongol advance. Kit Buka's attempt to rally his faltering troops proved increasingly futile. The Mongol lines, once a symbol of unstoppable conquest, were now fragmented, their momentum completely shattered by the Mamluks' calculated patience and unwavering determination. Sultan Qutuz observed the unfolding battle with keen eyes, issuing orders that maximized the effectiveness of his troops. Every reinforcement was delivered at the opportune moment, and every maneuver was executed with precision. The Mamluks masterfully exploited the terrain, transforming narrow valleys and hills into natural traps that constricted Mongol movements and amplified the effectiveness of their defensive strikes. The Mongols' famed ability to dominate through superior mobility was effectively neutralized, allowing the Mamluks to capitalize on their own strengths: discipline, coordination, and intimate knowledge of the land. By late afternoon, the Mongols were in full retreat, their forces utterly routed. Survivors scattered across the plains, many captured, while others were lost amidst the chaos of the battlefield. Kitbuka himself was seized, his capture symbolizing the definitive collapse of Mongol dominance in the Levant. The Mamluks' triumph at Ain Jalut was complete, a decisive victory that not only halted the seemingly unstoppable Mongol advance, but also fundamentally shifted the strategic balance of power in the region. The valley, once the stage for relentless fury and bloodshed, now settled into an eerie quiet, broken only by the groans of the wounded and the solemn task of tending to the dead. The significance of Ain Jalut resonated far beyond the immediate battlefield. It marked the first substantial defeat of the Mongol army, demonstrating to the world that even the most formidable empire could be resisted and overcome through strategic planning, unwavering courage, and unified action. Sultan Qutuz and Baibars emerged as legendary figures, their exceptional leadership and foresight forever immortalized in the annals of history. For the Mamluk soldiers, the battle served as a testament to their resilience, skill, and unwavering determination, a defining moment of unparalleled pride and honor. As night descended, the Mamluks consolidated their positions, securing the hard-won territory. Fires were lit to provide warmth and light. The wounded were carefully tended to, and vigilance was maintained against any potential counterattack. The valley, once a place of terror and destruction, was transformed into a space of reflection and quiet triumph. Soldiers spoke in hushed tones of the bravery they had witnessed, the sacrifices that had been made, and invaluable lessons learned in the intense heat of combat. Ain Jalut would be remembered not merely as a battle, but as a potent symbol of the enduring power of human strategy and resilience in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds. The story of Ain Jalut became a timeless narrative of courage, wisdom, and unity. It eloquently illustrated how foresight, discipline, and collective effort could overcome even the most fearsome enemies, leaving behind a lasting legacy that will continue to inspire generations to come. The Mongols' reputation for being unstoppable had been irrevocably shattered, and the Mamluks had proven beyond any doubt that unwavering determination, strategic intelligence, and collective effort could triumph over seemingly invincible power. The Valley of Ain Jalut, scarred yet silent, stood as a lasting monument to the enduring spirit of those who dared to resist and ultimately emerge victorious.